Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Tammy Wong Hulbert, a lecturer in the School of Art in the Masters of Arts Management program and a lecturer of curating, and also a member of Contemporary Art and Social Transformation CAST, a research group within the School of Art, and with a focus on migration, mobility, and art. I'm a middle-aged Chinese Australian woman with black shoulder-length hair, wearing a blue top and a grey spotted scarf. So welcome to the launch of Reclaiming Narratives, Melbourne Artists Respond to I Am Not a Virus. For this event, we had wanted to host a discussion on the curatorial process, project development, and the broader topic of Asian COVID-19 racism in Australia, and considerations made on this project. So you will have noticed that there are no artist speakers for this event. However, RMIT Intersect and the Curatorial Collective is organising a separate artist talk on during the last week of the exhibition, which will be focused on the artist's work. And more details for this event will be announced in the near future when finalised. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which the RMIT University stands, on which I'm standing today. The lands of the Wurrung and the Bunurong language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nation. I respectfully acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging, and would like to acknowledge the amazing work that is actually showing on the slide behind Wurundjeri Beek Law of the Land, which sits at the centre of RMIT's Bowen Lane and is a work by Dr. Vicky Cousins, Jeff Neal and Hilary Jackman. And the work actually conjures Bunjil the Great Creator spirit wrapped in a possum skin cloak to remind us that our local Indigenous community, ancestors and spirit are ever present, reminding us whose land we are situated on. So just to let you know, this Zoom event will be recorded and published on the CAST, RMIT Intersect and Diversity Arts websites afterwards. Some of the presentation and works contain words and graphic references on racial and/or gender violence that may upset audiences and contain some mild, coarse language, some potentially triggering content or themes, including violence, sexual assault or abuse, violence against women, mental health, COVID-19, and coronavirus. I would further like to advise that there is counselling services available on the I Am Not a Virus website under the Get Support tab, where you can find Asian Australian mental health practitioners. And also for RMIT students, there is counselling available through the university. And we'll share those links with you at the end of our discussion today. I'd like to acknowledge the amazing team that have pulled this project together, including our Auslan interpreters, Cindy Boychuk and Paul Houston, who are here today to support us. Reclaiming Narratives is an artist-led exhibition series designed to confront xenophobia and racial and cultural stereotypes and provide a counter-narrative to issues of long-standing racism in Australia that have been highlighted in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic through the voice of artists identifying with having experiences of prejudice. It has been a difficult period of time for the Asian Australian community, and I have personally experienced the racist backlash that the dynamics of the pandemic has created. While we are meeting tonight digitally, we are pleased that this project will be exhibited at RMIT's Project Space and Spare Room Gallery in Carlton, Victoria, during November. And this is actually one of the very first exhibitions that we're able to physically present on campus again. So we're really, really thrilled that this is our first exhibition back. I would like to start by thanking the 29 artists, filmmakers, creatives, writers, and collaborators for their incredible work and participation in this project, which includes Sophia Chai, Yuanju Chun, Seiwai Fu, Weena Jie, Judy Guo, Yobi Li, Mimi Leung, Jacqueline Lowe, Elena Simbolan, Sarah Tan, and Deborah Fei Li. Yunyang Chen, Jingwen He, Fu La, Jocelyn Meredith, Zicheng Shui, Clarine Wilmer, Nathan Lowe, Liao, Sean Stephen Ryan, Benjamin Sok Hui Yap, Jacqueline Dixon, Derek Ho, Deborah Ong, and Joe Paradise Liu, and Theresa May Chung, Fifi Liao, Mags and Amy Zhang, and Kelly Yoon. In addition to the creative contributions, there are many others I would like to acknowledge and thank for their work in developing and enabling this iteration of the exhibition. This includes the initiators of the I'm Not a Virus project, Diversity Arts Australia, and the financial support of the Australia Council for the Arts, Creative Victoria, Create New South Wales, City of Sydney, City of Parramatta, and Inner West Council, supported by the Asian Australian Alliance, Democracy in Colour, and 4A Centre for Contemporary Asian Art. Also, I would like to thank Creative Brimbank and the Melbourne Fringe Festival for their support. So it's really fantastic to actually see a Sydney-Melbourne alliance as well. This project has been produced by Lena Nahlous and co-curated by Kevin Bathman and Wilson Yong Chun Wai. At RMIT, this project has been driven by the student-led Curatorial Collective, a group supported by RMIT Student Life. I would like to acknowledge the project support team of Catherine Y. Yi Li, Jan Wingting Zhu, Ava Dong, Helen Chung, and Mara Braun, and the exhibition design of Tiger Yoon Long Jen, and the advisory support of Kelly Yoon. Many of the team have been students and alumni of the School of Art, and we're very proud of the work that they have done to get this project up and running during this difficult period of that pandemic and lockdown. This event is being co-produced by RMIT Culture and the RMIT Research Group CAST, and the exhibition is being hosted at Project Space Fair Room Gallery by RMIT Intersect. I would like to acknowledge my university colleagues in these teams who have helped bring this project to the university, including Jahan Reza Khan Lu Taubman, Eric North, Tim McLeod, Michaela Bear, Vivian Cooper, Andrew Tetzler, and Sarah Workmeister. I would also like to recognise the broader support and leadership in the College of Design and Social Context, including Professor Tim Marshall, Professor Kit Wise, Associate Dean Kristen Sharp, and Paula Toll. Today, we would like to introduce some of the artists and their work, including Deborah Ong and Joe Paradise Liu, Hula, Jocelyn Meredith, Yeon Ju Chun and Yun Yang Chen, and a panel discussion with Wilson Young, one of the co-curators, Kevin Bathman from Diversity Arts, Imogen Yang, an arts access consultant and selection panelist for the project, and Erin Chu, founder of the Asian Australian Alliance, about the themes explored in the exhibition. During our event, if you have any questions or comments, can you please add them to the chat, and we will address them when we're during our discussion session. Over to you to show the video trailer.
Out of bushfire season, COVID caught us off guard. We panicked, we feared. This pandemic has awoken a sleeping giant. Our diverse community was broken in unity.
One side of the circle is a pangolin, which represents the Asian creature, and another side of the circle is a platypus, which represents the
poem born on a battlefield. On a dry battlefield caught on fire, swaying in the grey wind of yellow peril, Hatred flames up and burns our dignity.
Hey, can I join in? All the other dragons stopped playing and stared at her and just laughed away.
We take like yearly road trips to the beach because that's what we do as a family, and the amount of times that we've had xenophobia or blatant like racist attacks is so common that I've unfortunately gotten a bit used to it.
To me is about how to handle situation better, how you can bounce back from your trauma or
Hello, my name is Joe and I'm an artist.
Hi, I'm Dev and I'm a chef.
And I cannot cook to save my life.
I am fascinated with the role of food in cultural identity.
We thought that
virus doesn't discriminate, so it spreads, but the way we deal with it has a heavy influence from discrimination.
Firstly, I'd like to introduce Lena Nahlous, the Director of Diversity Arts, to speak about the project. Thank you, Lena.
Thanks, Tammy. Thank you also, Tammy, for facilitating this really exciting, important discussion and for all of your work on the exhibition and on the project. I'm joining today from the unceded lands of the Wong of the Eora Nation, and I'd also like to acknowledge and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Diversity Arts Australia is Australia's national voice for ethnocultural and migrant racial equity in the creative sectors. And you can find out more about us at our website, diversityarts.org.au. I'm a middle-aged Arab Australian woman with brown eyes and brown hair, wearing a black top and a headset. So just a little bit about the project. Last year during the pandemic, we distributed the Lost Work for Creatives of Colour survey, which Monique Choi and I worked on at the beginning of the pandemic, so that we could kind of understand what the key concerns were for creatives of colour and how we could best advocate for them in the, in the context of the pandemic. And what we got back, the responses that we got back, quite a few of those responses talked about their experiences of racism as a result of being Asian, as a result of being associated with COVID. And so alongside this, artists who we were working with, like actor and filmmaker Maria Tran, were also contacting us and saying, this happened to me, you know, I went to the supermarket and, you know, I had this kind of experience of racism. And alongside that, within the team, we were also, you know, witnessing it within the communities that we were working in and living in at the time. And you'd have to kind of be on another planet to not know that this was happening. So we were thinking, what can we do? What can we do? And thought maybe we should do a survey just specifically about this. And then we were told about the Asian Australian Alliance already doing this excellent survey, their incident report. And we reached out to Erin Chu, who was working with Osmond Chu as well, to say, how can we support this? Can we partner? Can we help distribute the survey? And then we supported each other. We also reached out to Democracy in Colour, and we decided that our role as Diversity Arts Australia, as a national racial equity organisation focused on arts and culture, would be to actually develop an artist-led project. So the I'm Not a Virus project would be the kind of, I guess, response, the artistic response, the creative response to what was happening. And there were a few really important things for me in wanting to in wanting this project to happen and feeling the significance and importance of this. Australian culture as a has a way of kind of, you know, kind of sweeping really important moments in history, particularly kind of where there's been a significant increase in racism under the carpet. And so we've seen that with, you know, the anti-Asian racism that was brought about with Pauline Hanson's rise to power in the 90s, and significant anti-Asian racism, anti-Arab racism with the Cronulla riots in 2005. And I felt that we really needed to mark this moment, to pay testament to this moment by producing this project, and also to shift the narrative. So, you know, the news narrative, of course, is Asian communities are victims in this, and it doesn't tell the full depth and breadth of, you know, kind of, it doesn't give opportunity necessarily for people, for artists and creatives or people in general from Asian communities to actually be able to respond in their own terms, on their own platforms in ways that they choose, even outside of that narrative completely. So, so we really were, you know, we felt this was really important. And I think when I first talked about it with Kevin, we were thinking 10 artists, which of course, you know, if anyone knows how brilliant Kevin is, that grew to 46 artists at the end of last year, and then 68 by the end of this year. And, you know, and if you think about it, I can't ever acknowledge Kevin Bathman enough as the producer of the project, because if you've had to negotiate contracts with 68 artists and all the little bits that come with that, then you know how difficult that work can be. And we were really fortunate to get a range of support that Tammy's already mentioned, and that we were able to use this as kind of tapping into that COVID funding, because also being able to pay artists was a really important thing for us during COVID, and continues to be. So, so that's just a little bit of history about how it came about. And we had such a huge response from Victorian artists that I did approach Creative Victoria separately and said, you have to fund this, you have to give us some extra funding, because, you know, we don't have enough funding to contribute to all of the artists. And Creative Victoria were fantastic, and they did actually give us some additional funding so that the extent of what you're seeing, it was, you know, able to happen. So just a massive thank you to Tammy and the team at RMIT and CAST and the wonderful curatorial collective. And Tammy's already mentioned a lot of other people, but these kinds of projects, they only happen with a community around you. You can never claim that, you know, it was one person. It's always collective work That's all, I think. Was I 5 minutes? Did I go over?
Great, Lena. No, you didn't at all. That's fine. And I just really wanted to say, in terms of it being collective work with the Asian Australian Alliance, you know, when I encountered racism, I had that support to actually be able to report what had happened to me. So I really appreciate that there's a whole network and a community that supported each other during this difficult time. Thank you, Lena.
Thank you.
Anyway, just following on, I would actually like to hand over to our Associate Dean of the School of Art, Kristen Sharp, who will also do a welcome from the School of Art and the Caste Migration, Mobility and Art team. And Kristen is also a writer and a curator who has been researching and lecturing in the space of contemporary Asian art for many years now. And so we are really thrilled that she's been really supportive of this project. And I'd like to welcome Kristen to do her introduction for the school. Thank you, Kristen.
Oh, thanks, Tammy. And thank you too for, all your amazing contribution for tonight's event, but also on the project. So I'm a white female with brownish hair and glasses, and I'm wearing a gray top and a brightly colored scarf. And I would also like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Eastern Kulin Nations, on whose unceded lands I live and work. And I recognize their sovereignty and continued connection to land, water, and community. And I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'm really, really delighted to join in tonight's launch and celebration of such a powerful and significant project, which confronts xenophobic and racist stereotypes, which have been exacerbated through the COVID-19 pandemic. I Am Not a Virus disrupts and reclaims narratives through the voice of artists, and really demonstrates the power of art to generate social and cultural transformation. RMIT School of Art stands in solidarity and as an ally with the artists and the public who are experiencing this racism, and we seek to continue to reclaim public voices, perspectives, visibility, and respect. My sincere thanks to Lena and Kevin, who have brought this exhibition together with the support of Diversity Arts, the Asian Australian Alliance, Democracy in Colour, and 4A Centre for Contemporary Asian Art. And more specifically tonight, I'd really like to thank Wilson Yeung Chun Wai and the Curatorial Collective here at RMIT. The Curatorial Collective is an amazing student-led initiative supported by RMIT Student Life, and many of this group, as Tammy mentioned, are alumni from the School of Art or alumni from our partner in Hong Kong, the Hong Kong School of Art, or are still current students here at RMIT. And we're incredibly proud to continue to work with them to present projects like I Am Not a Virus. And it's been a great delight to watch this project evolve and be presented at Project Space through their care, their enthusiasm, and their expertise. In the School of Art, we aspire to be a culturally safe, creative, and intellectual environment that values diverse views, knowledges, and experiences of our students, staff, alumni, and arts sector colleagues that make up our art community. The school is founded on a deep commitment to contemporary art, to diverse ways of knowing, and the important role of art in a global society. And we aspire to achieve real and lasting social and cultural impact and transformation through our teaching, through learning, and through partner projects like I Am Not a Virus. CAST, or Contemporary Art and Social Transformation, is one of our key research groups at RMIT University, and it has an amazingly strong reputation for leading innovative art projects, which engage directly with a range of partner organizations and communities. And they're focused on artistic practices that intersect with issues of equity, access, and democracy. I Am Not a Virus has been supported by the Caste Mobilities and Migration Research Area, which is led by Tammy, myself, and our colleague Pia Johnson. And we seek to engage with projects in the Asia-Australian region to examine how creative and cultural practices can reimagine the social, political, environmental, and ethical issues of mobility and migration in a globalizing society. I Am Not a Virus is an incredibly critical exhibition for the Australian and international arts community, and the School of Art feels incredibly privileged to be able to be a part of it and to support it alongside CAST and RMIT Culture. And really importantly, for those of us in Melbourne, it's a delight to be able to present this as a physical show at RMIT Project Space. And it's just a wonderful way to relaunch the art and gallery scene of Melbourne. And in fact, it will be the first art show that I have seen in many, many months in person. So it's just so exciting. So thank you to everyone who has brought this show together. Thanks, Tammy.
Thank you, Kristen. That's great. We are going to now present some artist videos to just present some of the different voices that was heard through the exhibition. Thank you.
Hi, my name is YJ.
This is Yun Yang.
My name is Joe Paradise Lui.
Hi, I'm Deb.
My name is Jocelyn.
My name is Fula. Since the COVID pandemic hit last year, we have so many lockdowns in Melbourne. And of course, everyone has up and down because they don't know how their life heading to.
You know about the China virus? Started circulating last year. You know, what really came to the fore for myself was this idea of belonging. I feel that in Australia there's this almost this aversion to difference. You know, the differences are tolerated. There's a desire for sameness, which is sad because I feel that there's so much strength that can come from diversity.
For others who kind of don't see that racism is actually a spectrum. You know, we kind of just see racism as the big verbal or physical abuse, but it's happening here in Australia. And it's also the undertones that our actions carry. It's the biases that kind of informs our actions. And my work is of 5 shoes that I've stitched together called I Am Australian Too. They're of 5 people that I interviewed about their racism experience during this pandemic here in Australia. And I guess it stems from my own incident as well that I faced last year. And so that actually helped me to go, that's what I want to portray through my artwork and create a space for people to actually unpack that a bit and question it, hopefully to redefine what racism is and looks like and feels like as well.
We should figure out as a society how we can deal with these issues from the core and deal with it peacefully like we did in this project.
I have to thank Dots and all the amazing curators from RMIT for organizing this show. I think it's a great opportunity to spread our stories, thoughts, and keep people connected.
Prior to COVID, there was a large focus on work by diverse and POC artists. There's a bit of worry that in the kind of steps to recovery that can be a bit forgotten, so projects like this have been really wonderful and great for that.
That was wonderful to see all those amazing works that have come out of this whole process. And I am going to now hand over to Mara, who is from the Curatorial Collective, and she's going to introduce our panel speakers for us now. Thank you, Mara.
Thank you, Tammy. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mara Braun, and I'm an artist and curator and part of the Curatorial Collective here at RMIT. This evening, I'm joining you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Eastern Kulin Nation. I'm a white woman in her 20s. My pronouns are she, her, and I have short blonde hair and dark eyes, wearing a yellow shirt and a green scarf. Next slide. I'd just like to acknowledge some trigger warnings for tonight's content. Some of the works may contain words and graphic references on racial and/or gendered violence that may upset audiences. It also contains some mild, coarse language and potentially triggering content or themes, including violence, sexual assault or abuse, violence against women, mental health, and COVID-19 and coronavirus. On the slide behind me, where anyone should go for support if they feel a need. There are links where you can access counselling or same such things. I would further like to advise that there are counselling services available on the I Am Not a Virus website under the Get Support tab, where you can find Asian Australian mental health practitioners. And also for RMIT students, counselling is available through the university. I would now like to introduce our speakers for tonight's panel. Our first speaker will be Kevin Bathman, who is an independent curator, cultural activist, and creative producer who is passionate about advancing social change through creativity and create long-term social transformation. With many years of experience as a creative and communications specialist, Kevin has led various creative activism projects using the creative arts as a catalyst for change. He devises platforms to showcase artists and changemakers who use their craft to enrich cultural identity, explore shared values, and empower communities. A Chevening scholar with an MA in Cultural Studies from Goldsmiths, Kevin has a keen interest in the study of diaspora movements, post-coloniality, climate justice, and political art. Next, we have Wilson Yuan Chun Wai, is an artist, curator, researcher, and creative producer. Wilson is currently a PhD candidate at School of Architecture and Urban Design and an industry member of Contemporary Art, Society and Transformation, or CAST, research group at RMIT University. He is a collaborator and independent curator, a collaborator of Independent Curators International, a selected young curator of Shanghai Curator Lab at Shanghai University of Fine Art at Shanghai University, and an alumni of 4A Curators Intensive. Wilson's special interest lies in collective and curatorial practices and Asian contemporary art in an Australian context. His practice-led research, Curating in Between, focuses on exploring the role of curators and curatorial practice to develop collective curatorial strategies and frameworks. This research articulates curatorial practice that interrogates the role of a curator in facilitating cross-cultural collaborations as a cultural collaborator. Next slide, please. Next, we have Erin Wen-I Chu, who is a social interpreter, freelance writer, and social activist focusing on issues impacting on the Asian diaspora. Erin founded the Asian Australian Alliance back in 2013 as a way to include the Asian Australian voice in the mainstream and create a platform for change. Currently, her organisation is running an Australia-wide COVID-19 racism incident survey, which has garnered close to 500 responses thus far in Australia. More recently, the Asian Australian Alliances are the architects for the hashtag Stop Asian Hate, an Australian campaign which is collaborating with GoFundMe Australia. Last but certainly not least, we've got Imogen Yang, who is an independent creative producer and curator. She has over 22 years of experience in arts management and collaborative project delivery, intercultural and inclusive arts practice, and a wide range of experience working in diverse cultural and community contexts, the NFP and government sectors. She founded Insightful in 2008, focusing on social justice, health equity, and human rights initiatives and enhancing access to arts, culture, and media for people with disability, specializing in audio description provisions of access for people who are blind and vision impaired. I'll now hand back to Tammy to begin our panel discussion. And if you have any questions or comments during the procedures, please add them to the chat room. We will discuss as many as we can during question time after the panel discussion.
Thank you, Mara. That was great. So we will begin our panel discussion, but we'll start with a video before Kevin and Wilson will, a video to start. And we'll just play that now.
In a world where attacks on Asians are on the rise.
Racism!
Fucking Asian.
Excuse you?
The active group, I call it the right multicultural community. It's basically, I live in the right area. I wanted to, at least at the local level, be able to reach.
Tests and the beginnings of a global pandemic. It's a very strange time. My heart swells and sinks every day.
How to handle situation better, how you can.
The inspiration for this project is based on a comment that I experienced growing up.
She noticed a frowning man standing behind the woman, possibly her husband, with his hands wrinkled like crepe, reaching for her arm to offer support and possibly.
And that I am representing my people, and my people are also on the receiving end. So it's a whole.
I and most Australians want our immigration policy radically reviewed, and that
my people mass exported for slaughter, filling up ICU floors while your white colleagues. I'm not a virus， 更不是坏人，只是和你一样在这地球寻找快乐。I won't be silent。
Des is Chinese Viet, whereas I'm Viet Chinese. Both our families come from Rakyat, or Chinese.
There's little end in sight, just joys in the moment. The only constants were stress and uncertainty.
Don't you know how much is hurting? Can't you imagine the pain? It hurts you massively. And you don't.
Future. To set apart a world where we are all just human.
Faces swollen with pride dare a virus that hides in tabloids. And
Hey, so here are the ingredients for the laksa. Interesting fact, I didn't know what most of this stuff was prior to.
Ambling along. I hope they notice my face is hidden, and I hope they notice that I am sorry. I really am sorry, ma'am. I always...
The changing of space, gradually easing you into aloneness. No more of that here. Cut out That unnecessary middle bit.
My skin is not papyrus. I am not a virus. The name is A.
When did immigrant become such a dirty thing to be? When did my golden skin become synonymous with spreading disease? Corona racism makes me feel like...
Oh, it's because I'm Asian. You know.
So how do you stay connected to your Asian heritage?
Because by talking to...
Thank you for showing that video. I'd like to invite the panel members, Kevin and Wilson and Imogen and Erin to turn on their cameras when they're ready. But I'd also like to just thank Mara for the introductions and also for working on the development of the questions for our panel today. I'm just going to change my view. Okay, so panel, thank you for making the time to be here today with us. We're really excited to hear your individual perspectives on the subject of racial prejudice that was unleashed during the pandemic era and how you've responded to it. So in fact, my son and I personally experienced it in our local area, and so did many of our students in the community, which led to an earlier artistic collaboration with our international students. And at that time, we were actually responding to the border closures to China and how that impacted on many of our students. And so, you know, that was just one incident. There's actually been many incidents that have happened over the last 2 years. And it has been an incredibly difficult time and really made worse by the social isolation that we've all experienced. So just to start with my first question, developing the project, one of the unique distinctions of the Reclaiming Narrative I Am Not a Virus project was the openness of the call out for this project, dealing with creative responses to racial prejudice from the Asian Australian artist community. What informed the choice to have such an inclusive open call, and how has it shaped the community, both behind the scenes and in the forefront of the project? Was the intention right from the beginning for the project to be a kind of curatorial activism? And Erin, can you give us more background to the context of what was happening in the Asian Australian community at the time?
Yeah, thank you, Tammy, and thank you to the organisers of this event. So first of all, I just want to acknowledge that I am currently in San Diego, so that is the Indigenous people of the Kumeyaay people, but I was born and raised on Darug land in Sydney. And I am of Chinese Malaysian background, long black hair, and I have I think it's a black, green, and white top. So just to kind of touching on your question, I guess the I Am Not a Virus project started at around the same time as when we launched the COVID-19 racism incident report survey, which our collaborators were with Osman Chu and our partners with Diversity Arts, Australia and Democracy in Colour. And this happened around 2020 and really happened at the start of the pandemic when we saw how COVID-19, at that time was called coronavirus, impacted on the people of Wuhan in China, and the racism that came from that. And I think we saw a lot of that from the artworks that have been presented at the show. So for example, just to give you some context, some of the headlines that happened right at the start of 2020, what we saw on the tabloid media, Chinese virus and other headlines like Chinese kids stay home, the big red Chinese flag used as a backdrop for a lot of the, tabloid media and things like that. And I think also at that time, Asian Australians or Asian/Asian Australians were getting tired of the racism and the experiences that they've been having. And a lot of them, particularly in the early part of 2020, actually came out on social media and shared their experiences publicly. And that really spurred a lot of the projects like our survey, like the I Am Not a Virus project and other things that have came after that. And I think also just to kind of add some context, and I don't want to spend too long on this question. I know other people want to speak as well. So my kind of final point is that actually the COVID-19 pandemic is not the cause of anti-Asian racism in Australia. It's just a symptom of a bigger problem of racism, but also more specifically anti-Asian racism history. So, you know, if people want to do some research, you research all the way from the mid 1800s, from the gold rush period, and, you know, up to the Pauline Hanson's time. And the other one is the kind of lazy language that Australian government, but also the media and the court of public opinion had been using on how they discuss the growing influence of the Chinese government. And I think it's not saying that you cannot talk about those issues, but it's about the language that's being used. And at the moment, the language is quite lazy. So I'll kind of leave it from there because I know other people want to speak as well.
Thank you, Erin. I might invite Kevin to speak if you'd like to comment.
Sure. Hi. So I'm a middle-aged Asian man with black hair. I'm wearing a checkered shirt and I've got a Chinese Indian background from Malaysia. I guess, you know, while we've heard from all the other speakers about how, you know, obviously COVID-19 does not discriminate, but I think this particular incident, you know, about COVID-19 racism really had a specific target, right, within the Asian community, and they sort of got the brunt of it, you know, through physical violence, harmful words, and also isolation as well. So I guess when we were conceptualizing this project with Lena and the team at Darts, we were really accurately aware that, you know, this particular strand of, you know, COVID-19 racism had a really devastating and violent effect on Asian Australian community. And as part of that, you know, the artists and creative community that we work with also reported, you know, that they were also shunned and experienced a lot of more pronounced and direct racism towards during the pandemic. So I think that sort of led to us wanting to have the almost the submission criteria pretty loose in that sense, you know. We accepted submissions from across Australia in various art forms, formats, level of expertise and creative expressions. And in many ways, we didn't really want to limit the creative responses from the community to really to express, you know, in terms of our art form experience and also location. So I think, you know, beyond supporting the Asian Australian art community to use this opportunity, I think, you know, the shortlisted artists were also given a fee, you know, which was really important, particularly during the pandemic when, you know, a lot of projects were also cancelled. And I was really happy with this approach because I think we received submissions from a lot of artists whom I think we would not have had the opportunity to even meet, you know, in Darts, I mean. And what was really interesting was that, you know, we also had a mixture of artists from first generation Asian migrants to second generations and beyond Asian Australians, you know, so that was to me a sort of a really good outcome because I think, you know, very often not, you know, we do miss out on a lot of the sort of the first generation migrant artist community. And we also received, you know, obviously from all states as well, but the bulk of the submissions really came from New South Wales and also from Victoria. And as you've seen earlier with the video, you know, there was just this diverse mix of works, you know, from films to dance to performance to poetry, comics. So that was really exciting, and we were also really pleased that, you know, that a lot of the artists that were selected were also emerging artists who had been selected for the first time, you know, for a commission work. So I think that was a really good outcome for us. Yeah.
Excellent. That's really great to hear, and I think so important during the last 2 years to find some way to support the art community, which has really been so devastatingly affected during this period of time. Wilson, did you have
Yes. Yes.
contributions?
I'm a Wilson. Yes, I'm a young man, and then with a yellow skin, and then with a gas today. Actually, I'm as a co-creator. Thank you, Dax, to give us the opportunities, and RMIT for the support these amazing programs. For my perspective, I think it's quite important for this moment. We can open the gates in the Victoria, and we have doing national connections between Sydney and Melbourne for this amazing project. And also, I guess is what Kelvin says. I really agree with Kelvin's point of view about giving the voice for the artist communities to talk more about their feeling, specifically in Asian Australian identities artists. And then I guess we have a lot of preparation for this project. Have a lot of challenge against with the COVID-19 situation. For example, we work with the Finch Festival, but unfortunately, the program can be the physical present, and also in the RMIT cultures and also the other venues, we have a different face different challenges. But I guess a lot of differences, and then we try to solve it, and then also as a collectively, and then with all the student support and academic support in here. And I remember, I think our today have a lot of presenter, and then they prepare some presentation for us. Maybe we can go for the presentation first, and then we can share the insight maybe more later. What do you think, Tammy?
The presentation?
Yes.
Yes, sure, sure. We can do that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
Should I just, can we get Imogen to respond first?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yes.
Imogen,
we'll just finish off. And, and then we'll show the presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
Imogen, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Hi, Tammy, and hello, acknowledging all my fellow hosts and panelists and the audience, and of course the artists that have contributed to this incredibly significant project. It's been a real privilege to be granted the opportunity to sit on the selection panel for this project as it's rolled out across the country. And it is a project, I think, with global significance, as Erin has highlighted, in providing us some context to the events that we have been witnessing amongst the many forms of uncertainty and instability that have been brought about by this global crisis that we all find ourselves in. It's particularly saddening to see the rising tides of racism and xenophobia and misinformation that have accompanied that situation. So it's really important for us all to find ways to overcome those and to reconnect with ourselves as individuals and communities. I wanted to acknowledge that I am calling in from Terra Marigal land in the place now known as Sydney, and it is really, really important for us to acknowledge country, and in doing so, for us to connect with the deep roots of history here in this place that we are so lucky to call home. It is a place of great beauty and power, but also a place that has a long history of trauma, of discrimination, of division and injustice. And it's incredibly important that we find our ways through that and out of that to a place of healing. And I think that this project is a really good way for us to remind ourselves of the many ways that artists and art allow us to do that, through talking about the things that are sometimes too difficult to confront and to talk about and to move through in any other way.
Thank you, Imogen. That's wonderful. It's really amazing, I think, to have us all together, but to actually hear everyone is on different Indigenous land, and to actually acknowledge where we are and how we connect to that land. I think we are going to show another short video, which is actually some SBS news coverage, and I'll get Kat to get that going.
Well, a new exhibition is highlighting the experience of Asian Australians who have been subjected to racist abuse during the COVID-19 pandemic. The project, entitled #IamNotAvirus, is giving 68 artists of Asian descent a powerful platform to tackle hurtful stereotypes.
Completely covered in personal protective equipment, Andrea Srisurapon takes centre frame, her audio-visual piece reflecting how she felt when she was attacked with a racial slur.
Somebody made a remark about how they hoped that I wasn't bringing COVID into the country.
The Thai Australian artist says her abuser mistook her for a Chinese person and blamed her personally for the pandemic. Her piece questioning the false narratives that underpin such beliefs.
Asians are perceived as yellow and yellow skin, and as I take off the COVID gear, I'm actually not of yellow skin, I'm of olive tone.
The series of exhibitions will give 68 artists an important platform
to speak from positions of power on their own terms and to create the work and the conversations that they want to create rather than them being the subjects of those conversations.
And it was a call out for victims of racial abuse to share their stories that inspired the artwork, with the hope now that it will start a broader conversation.
Encourage Australian audiences to think about what it means to be Asian Australian. How can we rewrite the narrative for ourselves?
Jin Lau was spurred on to create this comic strip to critique the media's coverage of race issues. The young artist stunned by how a COVID-19 related hate crime was covered in the mainstream media.
They actually did the same thing as the assailants by assuming they were Chinese, but they were actually Singaporean and Malaysian. And I only found this out by looking up Singaporean and Malaysian news.
He says media outlets are unfair when deciding on who gets to have a voice.
A lot of the time, the victims don't get a voice. Like, they report the incident, but the victims themselves is just mostly a statistic.
But some works also evoking powerful cultural joys as a counter-narrative to dark and hurtful stereotypes. Dozens more projects are set to be displayed at multiple venues across the country in the coming weeks. Dom Vukovic, SBS World News.
Thank you for that. Amazing to see such good footage on SBS, of such great coverage on SBS News. I'd like to, and just in relation to the panel discussion, I'm just going to move on to question 2. So we've already touched on the sheer variety of artistic responses to the project, and now I'd like to take a deeper dive into some of the themes and modes of practice that went into and informed many of the chosen works. What strategies did you find artists used to express their ideas? And what were the main concerns? And I'll just get Kevin Wilson and Imogen to speak to that. And I have, for Erin, I'd like you to comment on how some of these things relate to the broader concern of the Asian Australian community after the 3 have spoken. Thank you. Maybe we'll start with Imogen this time, actually, if you want.
Thanks, Tammy. It's a big question. The strategies that people have come up with in the artworks that make up this exhibition and this broader project are just incredibly diverse. The creative strategies, the conceptual strategies, and the personal strategies for coping and dealing with incidents of racism. Just really instructive. There's so much in this project for any one of us, wherever we're coming from, whatever our perspective, whatever our heritage might be, whatever our day-to-day experiences are, or our histories and stories. There is something for all of us in this exhibition. I thought I might just sort of mention some of the individual artists in terms of different strategies that they have engaged with. We have got such a range of works, textile works, ceramic works, video works, works that incorporate found footage and news footage, works that are illustration, cartoons, dance works. It's really amazing. So I'll just touch on a few of those to give you a sense of some of the strategies, and then other panel members might want to pick up on some of those things. One of the items that I think was really interesting was a garment that the artist Lena has made out of disposable masks, the masks that all of us have become used to wearing. She's used a quantity of black disposable masks and stitched them together in a very artisanal construction to make a Qipao inspired garment, and each of those masks have had words inscribed on them in white handwriting that reflect racist comments and things that people have said, possibly to the artist or to other people that she knows. But in doing that act, which presumably may have been quite painful in recollecting the words and transcribing them, has transformed them into a garment which could be almost seen as like a warrior, a piece of armor. It's made of very soft material, but it has a protective function, I would say, in the same way that masks do, in terms of reflecting back and perhaps just standing up for how some of us may feel when we're subjected to those kinds of comments, and finding a way to do that that's gentle but very telling. Another artist, Saiwai, has made some very beautifully crafted textile dumplings that I think would speak to anybody who enjoys eating or making dumplings. And they also are, as well as being a very familiar everyday food item, have had words stitched on them, which again are reflective of terms of abuse. So I guess this is another way of confronting and coming to terms with this kind of language that is hurled at one unexpectedly, by displaying them as if they're a plate of edible food. I guess the thinking perhaps maybe around how we come to terms with ingesting those experiences and processing them, and out of those experiences making something more constructive. I'll just mention a couple more. One is a piece of music, which is very, very different piece. That's by Nathan Liao. And Nathan is a Melbourne-based musician who is playing on both the guzheng, which is a plucked Chinese instrument, and a Western-style keyboard, and has created a video of himself playing those two instruments concurrently. It's a musical piece. It has no words, but I think very, very much well worth listening to in just contemplating the ways that an individual perhaps embodies diversity of cultures and diversity of inheritance, and is able to take something of those realities and truths and integrate them into something that has beauty and not division. Another musical piece is one that you've heard some clips from during some of the pieces that have been shared. That was a project initiated by Sean Stephen Ryan, and it's an original song that he's engaged lots of singers and performers in arrangements with diverse cultural references. It's got a bit of a Hamilton vibe, actually, that song. It's got a little bit of a rap vibe, and maybe Sean Stephen Ryan's got a musical in him to make out of this experience. There's a line in it which is in the chorus, which is very simple message: I'm just a human, so treat me like a human. I'm not a virus. I'm just like you, seeking happiness in this world, reminding us that being racist is a choice and being kind is also a choice. Yeah, maybe some of the other panel members might want to chime in.
Wilson, would you like to comment?
Oh, yes. I think the ideas is about each artist's work is really amazing. But I remember Aaron have one presentation is more talking about the significance ideas and then about the racism during this pandemic period. Do you mind, Aaron, you can present it during this time, and then we can prepare the PPT for you?
Yep.
Yes.
No problem. Sure. Do you want me to share the screen, or?
I think Kat will have a screen. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. If you can share that.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Great. So thank you. So I'm not, it's quite an in-depth presentation. So I'm not going to go through all the statistics. I'm just going to choose some highlights. And for those who may be interested to kind of read the kind of full report, you can go to our website at asianaustralianalliance.net, and you can actually download a copy of the actual report. But so I guess the statistics or the data that I'm going to report on, the time period is the reports that came in from the 2nd of April 2020 to 28th of June 2021. And just so people have an understanding, just to date, so just say to today, we have almost 600 reports. So we did experience a little bit of a surge more recently. So just kind of going through some of these statistics. So the first one I want to kind of talk about is the types of incidents. And I'm just going to pick up the top 3, and you can kind of see that there are quite a lot of others. So if you look at, say, direct racial slur or name calling, so that constitutes stuff like going back to China, being called COVID-19, someone just yelling it out, made up about 35.7% of all responses. And then online harassment made up 25.7%. So that's stuff like, you know, people receiving comments on Facebook, receiving messages on social media, replies, you know, under different comments, emails, etc. And then we have other things like making it out as a joke, which made up about 13%. So making a racist targeted comment or statement and then laughing it off and or dismissing it as not being a racist, but just joking around. And just the one that I did want to pick out is that, you know, we have other things like physical intimidation / harassment. So that's actually getting physically attacked, made up about 7% of all responses. So you can kind of look at all the other ones, but I'm going to just quickly show you. So this is just a graph of the types of incidents that I mentioned. So you can kind of look at that in our report. I know I'm running out of time probably quite soon, so I'll go be very quickly. In terms of location, okay, thanks. Location of incidences, so where it is actually happening. So I guess it's not a surprise that the majority of incidents actually happened on a public street or sidewalk. Usually it's one of those casual racial slurs, people taking a walk and then a car driving past and something like, you know, coronavirus being yelled at that person, or they're just walking to work or walking to uni or wherever they may be, and then someone passing by is yelling out a racial attack at them, and that made about 27.1%. And then the second largest is in a supermarket, so at a Woolies, Coles, Kmart, usually grocery stores, so usually Woolies and Coles, and 15%, you know, where they and some of those examples include people being actually, you know, they may be taking one packet of toilet paper during that time when everybody was was thinking that the world was going to fall, and somebody walked up to them and said, don't take this stuff back to China. So a lot of people reported similar type of incidences happening at a Coles or Woolies. And the other one I want to mention is that a public transport was the third largest, about 9.6%. So that's, things happening on trains, buses, and ferries. And trains, obviously, and buses are probably the most problematic places in terms of public transport where racial slurs have been thrown around. And we've seen that in the news as well. So here, again, is a little bit of a graph just to kind of show you, I guess, more visually how that all kind of works. And I just want to kind of quickly go through just some, major other trends. And the first one I want to talk about is gender. So those who identified as female, who reported into our survey was around about 60%. And that's the overwhelming majority, where those who identified as male were 34.1%. So you can see that females are, the biggest group who are being targeted. And there's a lot of reasons behind that as well. And then so those respondents who identifies as self-described, so those who did not identify as being female or male, constituted for about 3.8% of respondents. Oh, and then in terms of cultural background, I guess the most obvious is those who had some type of Chinese cultural background. Doesn't mean that you are from mainland China Chinese. It can be Malaysian Chinese, Singaporean Chinese, Indonesian Chinese, Filipino Chinese, whatever, as long as you have some type of Chinese cultural background, it's about 52% who reported incidents. And other groups that came in is second group was Vietnamese at 8.38%, Malaysian 4.5%, Korean 6.5%, and then so forth. It goes to Singaporean and then Filipino at 3.2%. And so also note that respondents were able to select multiple cultural backgrounds and identities depending on what they identify as. And just two things that I did want to mention here is that around about 12.3% of respondents, they identified as international students, and 95% identified as mainland Chinese background. And the one that I also want to point out is that around about 84.8% said that they did not report their incident to the authorities. So that meaning reporting to the police or any kind of regulatory body. And again, here it's just a graph of the ethnicity of respondents. You can look, and these are all also in our report that can be downloaded. And here are just a bit of breakdowns of the racial identity. Now, the final thing I want to quickly go through is just very quickly, just some of the international trends, because we're currently finishing off our global report, which is a collaboration with Stop API Hate in the US. There's a group in the UK, Canada, and New Zealand. But the majority of the results, we're still waiting for the New Zealanders to update their results. So these ones are from US, Canada, and the UK, just very briefly. So just very quickly, this week, obviously, just want to say the Stop API Hate Reporting Center in the US has recorded over 10,000 incidents across the country, and that's significant. So that's from when they started at the beginning of 2020 to about now, 10,000. And in terms of what's happening in the US, there is actually what is not happening in Australia is that there is money invested, to combating the anti-Asian hate in America. So just as a quick update, because I want to quickly finish this part. California state government announced just on Monday that $165.5 million, which is sponsored by the API Legislative Caucus, will be dispersed over the course of the next few years to combat anti-Asian hate in the state of California. And if we look at another one about the Americans, is that a new, in the UK, for example, from their perspective, from 2019 to 2020, they've seen a 27% increase in hate crimes against Asians. And in Canada, they've from 2020 to 2021, they've received around about 2,265 reports. And one very common thing, the final thing that I want to say between Australia, Canada, UK, and even New Zealand is that the respondents who identified as female have been quite consistent at around about 60 to 65%. So again, my final thing is that the question is, are these negative stereotypes that impact on Asian women, is that part of the cause of what's happening? So I'll stop there because but that's but again, if you want to read the full report, just go to asianaustralianalliance.net and you can actually download a copy of our report. Thanks.
Thank you, Erin. That was really amazing to have that, bigger overview of the situation. I'll just invite Kevin back to actually also make some commentaries on the artistic forms and how people have responded to this bigger context.
I suppose, from the 68 works that were selected, the majority of them came from Melbourne as well, like 29 of them. And again, I think what stood out was just this diverse multitude of art forms that was selected. And also this sort of responses and the concepts that were expressed in these works were also, I think, someone else also mentioned, just quite diverse in that sense, from microaggressions to abusive words. And what was interesting was about, how some of the submissions were also really about reclaiming their sense of self and their identity, and also their sense of belonging in Australia as well. I think what the project really kind of also brought to fore was a much sort of a better understanding, or maybe an awareness, of really what it means to be, Asian in Australia. So looking at the good, the bad, and also the ugly as well. Which we often forget, to really acknowledge. But I think mainly, I think what I was really interested in was the fact that we had. We were able to sort of capture this moment in time almost, and really capture the sentiments that was felt during the pandemic, particularly for Asian creatives in Australia, and I think what came through was also the fact that, not only were some of their works really self-reflective, but I think, a lot of them were also inspired or maybe even influenced by a lot of what they've seen, or what was happening overseas as well, with COVID-19 racism being leveled at Asian community in those countries, and then particularly, I think, in the US, where, I think Trump's moniker of COVID-19 as the China flu and, Kung flu and all that, he obviously didn't help. So yeah, I think it was a bit sort of hard to sort of pinpoint particularly a particular sort of concept or direction that a lot of them took. I think the responses were so varied that we actually really did like having those diversity of thoughts, coming through. But I suppose and all, although I did like all of them, and it's a bit hard to sort of like pinpoint some of the works, but I think I'll probably just mention 3 works. I think that's not mentioned by others, that I thought were really interesting, and I think came from quite a different perspective. And this was actually the work of Deborah Lee and also Sarah Tan, and the work was actually called Let's Talk Perspectives, So they used augmented reality, so AR artworks, and they featured the stories of 3 Asians in Australia who were impacted in sort of a number of ways on COVID-19 related racism. And I quite liked how they used, in particular, AR in this format, and we were able to sort of capture it digitally as well. The other work was it's a comic sort of strip by UB Lee, and the work was entitled Journey to the West Southeast. And that was also inspired by one of the, I think one of the oldest mythological fiction, Journey to the West, with Monkey King and the monk going on a journey, and I think the spin was that they were going to West Southeast, which is actually Australia. So that was a really interesting spin. I thought that was also talking about this issue of racism, but in a sort of a very Latin way. And really, the third one I think that I thought was also quite interesting was from this exhibition was the works from Gina Jingwen He. Her work was titled Verbal Tinnitus, and that was made from clay, polystyrene, twine, and things like that. And it was really sort of what I would say a dramatization of, words and insults, were sort of felt like they were invisible weapons stabbing through each other, To me, I think, those were just sort of 3 sort of works that I thought was just quite unique in that sense. And not to say that the others weren't, but I'm just sort of pinpointing a few.
Sure. Great. Thank you, Kevin. Just wanted to check in with Lawson if he had anything else to add.
Yes. And also I think the other point is about the community's engagement. I think this time is really good to have the students to get involved. And actually, I got different school students they're working on, for example, the exhibition design, and then also they involved in the today's the holding the Shrooms meeting, and then for the spots and also the gallery setup. I think the idea is about Asian artists or creative industries and not just about the artists themselves, it's also including the whole communities. For example, for my experience as working a lot with international Asian students, and then I guess they also face a lot of problems. For example, when they graduate in Australia and how they get involved in the professional art circles. For example, how they get involved to working with a professional artists and art organizations. So I think this is a really good opportunity for us to get involved using these ideas and projects and negotiate by the student, also the creative committees to work together in the Asian identity contents. Yes, and the other things I would like to say is also is a really good opportunities for us to get involved, to got connection with the Sydney's art creative industry, because I guess in the Melbourne, we have a lot of Asian artists or Asian Australian artists in Melbourne, but actually we don't have a lot of people's, maybe they gathering the communities together. And then I think this is a good opportunities, for example, using RMIT University or the other venue. For example, the next project on December, we will go to the St. Albert's Community Art Centres, and then we can bring them to the West Melbourne, and then we can gather in the communities to share their voice and then their thinking about the problems or the issues during the COVID. Yeah.
Yep. Great. Thank you, Awesome.
Thank
And
you.
definitely for St. Albans area, there is a big Asian community out there as well, so out west. So it'll be really great to connect with that community. I think we are going to show one more video actually, Rituals of Resistance.
I was born in the east of the inner west, as in Newtown. I've been all around Sydney. It's always been my home, and yet I've still found people keep asking, so what's your background?
Sometimes I forget that I'm Asian. I forget about the never-ending cycle of proving my humanity, of my worthiness to a country that I rightfully belong to. The perpetual foreign effect means that an Asian will never...
And then the other things that I would encounter, and this is probably the most painful, is nobody should join me during morning tea or lunch break or dinner break. I have to have my own table on my own while the rest of them are on with the other staff.
Great. Thank you so much for that. We're at our final question, question 3. And I'd like to ask you the question concerning the role of the artist. And the role of the artist has long been debated within creative communities and with artists of I Am Not a Virus. Sorry, let me start again. The role of the artist has long been a debated topic within creative communities, with the artists of I Am Not a Virus centered on being artists as activists. Can you please speak to the relationship between art and cultural production and the role of activism? What do you think is the impact of artistic activism resulting from this show? And what is next for this conversation on racism? I'll invite Kevin to speak first.
Sure. I think just for context, the last video that we just saw was were actually works that were featured, that we were going to feature last year, but due to the pandemic, we had to postpone it. So those were works from the West Sydney artists for 10 pieces of work. Yeah, so I suppose, speaking from Darcy's perspective, I think Lena mentioned this earlier as well. Our work is really underpinned by human rights and social justice principles. And I think, we have long sort of advocated and centered the role of artists as activists in many of our projects. And I think from a personal perspective, I do believe that the arts is really sort of an untapped avenue for sort of catalyzing change. And to me, I think in particular the arts sector and artists themselves, really bring such diverse and unique perspectives, and we're able to sort of engage people with new ways, that other sectors would not be able to. And I feel like, a lot of the works that is done by artists as well are able to sort of really either influence or maybe change the perspectives of other people, and how we feel about certain issues. And actually, in fact, a few years ago, I used to run an arts for social change collective called Carnival Bold, and where we held this annual event where we showcase local artists, who were able to use their art for, to really talk about the issues that they are really passionate about. And even from back then, there's been a rise in awareness and an interest in also in a lot of socially engaged arts, and also in CACD work, which is community art and cultural development work. So I suppose, in terms of where to from here, it is a bit of a question mark in the sense that, because we don't know where the pandemic will end. So I suppose, what was really inspiring in this project was that, it had really did build a sort of a community around the topic itself, and I think, because we, in particular for this project, because we really centered the voices of Asian Australian artists, and Asian artists as well in Australia. I think that in itself will have sort of a flow-on effect, in years to come, because a lot of I guess networks were made, a lot of connections were made, even via the other artists themselves, So I think that will be sort of, I guess, in a sense, a legacy of this project in that sense.
Great. Imogen, do you like to comment?
Thanks, Tammy and Kevin. Oh gosh, activism takes so many forms and can be enacted in so many ways. So I think it's open to each of us to find the way that works for us best and that we are most comfortable to practice it. I want to really acknowledge my fellow panel members who were part of the selection process here. I want to acknowledge June Yikwok, Huafam, Michaela Tai, and Suna Share. And I do that here because, and maybe their names can be shared in the chat because I don't think the transcription is going to do that justice. I want to acknowledge them here because I think it's really important for the artists in the audience to know about the way that this was put together in terms of the kind of democratic process and the rigorous discussion and debate that was had amongst us. All of the people on that panel have a very diverse set of practices in their professional and personal lives, and all of them, I would say, without wanting to speak for anyone else, do activism in different ways in their creative and cultural production. Huafam is the founder of Peril magazine, which is a very significant magazine publishing the voices of Asian Australians. Junyi is a curator and cultural producer who also has established the Australian Bureau of Asian Creatives, which is a very significant Facebook public forum. Michaela is a former director of Foray and is currently at the Australia Council. Suna does a lot of community cultural development with disadvantaged and marginalised communities, as well as working at White Rabbit. And although those things may not necessarily sound like activism, that, which some people might think of as marching on the streets, we can do activism in all kinds of ways, in our working lives, in our personal lives, in our private lives. In terms of, strategies for coping, and how we activate ourselves, I think that needs to start at a very basic level with self-care, which was why it was great to hear you offer some resources for self-care in terms of counselling and support. And I really encourage people to do that first and foremost. And then as you go into your broader external activist lives, just remembering and really COVID pandemic has reminded us that the body is political and politics is embodied. We live it, we breathe it, we walk it. And so we need to take care of ourselves to be able to develop communities of care. And I hope that you will really take a deep dive into the work of these artists to find some strategies and some ways to do that, whether it just be remembering to breathe and meditate. That was a reminder to me in the work of Fei Liao, who does a dance work where she's breathing in a suitcase, all the way through to, say, the cartoons that are the posters, style cartoons of Judy Quor, which have, you know, kind of a little bit of a political quality to them, but also some very simple reminders, one of which I remember one of her taglines was, let's make anti-race, let's create herd immunity towards racism, which is, I think, a really great message for us to just take with us as we go into the world.
Great, thank you, Imogen. And it's really nice to hear you remind us of our need to care for ourselves during this difficult period. Wilson, did you want to make some contributions?
Oh, yes, thanks. Yeah. And then thanks, Imogen, about mention about the panels. I guess I just put on the chat, and then all the audience, you can look at the information or check more information on I'm Not a Virus .org.au website, and they have more information about the city artists and also Melbourne's artist work and all the project information. Yes. And also, I think one more thing I would like to mention is about the community engagement ideas in this project. Actually, first of all, we are thinking about this project have a 3 venues to activate in at the beginning of this year. So we are thinking about we have a project in Finch Chay Hall, and then also we will have a project exhibition project at RMIT University, and also we will bring it to go to Western Melbourne to have a project in the STACC community art centers. So I guess this is one of the ideas of why we think about is not just the Melbourne CBD project, is also is explore to the different communities and also network. Because I guess from my experience in Melbourne, I guess some Asian identities or maybe communities, actually they have sometimes they just located in some suburbs, or maybe not is really have a central point in Melbourne, actually, I guess. From my experience, because I previously lived in Grand River, I'm from Hong Kong, and then I have really strong Hong Kong communities in Grand River. And then after that, I'm thinking about, I'm doing my study and work in the CBD. But I think it's one of the ideas about how to decentralize the art project. Is not just so focused in the cities, is also is a delivery, the outreach programs in the different suburbs. And then we try to bring the project or bring the ideas to go to the communities and then work with the communities together. So this is, I think this is a really meaningful project. I think start from the Sydney and then come to the Melbourne. And I hope in the future we can go to maybe the other states, maybe Adelaide or Tasmania, and then we can explore these ideas to the others. Yeah. Thanks.
Great point, Wilson, about the distribution of the ideas to further communities and to where people actually live. Erin, I'll just check in with you and see if there's anything else you wanted to add.
Yeah, I'll just add like just 2 or 3 quick things. In terms of when we talk about, artists and activism, and I think a lot of the points that actually Imogen mentioned earlier were some of the things that I wanted to mention. So I think we're all kind of in that same mind frame. But if you look at some of the themes that kind of came out of it, identity, trauma, healing, intersections between Asian culture and what it means to be, what this definition of Australian is, also that sense of feeling unsafe, insecurity, loneliness. And I think just even talking about these issues, doesn't matter whether it's through art or just, any forms of art, it's already a form of activism, because they're talking about the issue. And these are things that are personal to each and all the artists involved. And just very quickly, also, I think when we're looking at the significance of the show is that even pre-pandemic, what type of show gave opportunities to Asian Australians to showcase their art? Hardly anything. And I think because we live in such a white-centric society where these institutions influence decision-making, there is hardly any opportunities for artists to kind of showcase their talent and their creativity. And I think if we look at it, we see that there's over 63 to 68 pieces of commissioned art that came out of this project. And we know that there are more people who are artists, who, didn't, submit, but that number is already a large number. And this idea that the institution, the kind of white-centric institution would always say, well, first of all, we cannot find any artists who have Asian background, using these excuses. This type of show shows that that's not going to happen anymore, because we can see that it's there. And it's about us and our community not relying on the mainstream and actually creating our own opportunities for all the different communities. And so even as just someone who's looking from the outside at these artwork, you can see, you feel, pride, and you feel proud of what all these artists have produced. And I think for the broader community, I've always said that stuff that I say could reach a certain sector of society. A huge majority of that society would be the preaching to the converted, and also those who have some knowledge. But when you kind of express it through art, you communicate in different ways, and people can interpret it in different ways. And it's an educational tool. So if you look at, that video of having the yellow paint being thrown at them, that's very extremely powerful in terms of, how people interpret that and what it actually invokes. And I think art is, like I said, a way that can actually reach different generations, but also speak to different groups of people as well.
Thank you, Erin. That was some great insights there, particularly in regards to what a huge community of artists that have responded to the theme. And you certainly could not say that it's too difficult to find an Asian artist anymore. That's really not an excuse. Okay, thank you so much for your contributions. I actually wanted to open it up to questions from our audience. And I'm just wondering if there are any questions that have been added to the chat. No questions. Okay, is it just checking if anyone has anything that they wanted to, anyone from the audience wanted to put forward any questions? We encourage you to do that while we have a bit of time at the end now.
Actually, I have a questions I want to bring up. Yes, sorry, Tammy.
Sure. No,
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah. Actually, I would like to maybe ask for the other experts and peers to think about what is the next about this project, and about because I think this is an amazing opportunity. We can get more than around 100 Asian Australian artists or communities involved. And then I think this is particularly really important experience. And also we connect with DACS and then also the other Asian organizations such as the 4A and RMIT research group. So I guess this is maybe a good opportunities in the future. Maybe we can do more things or like a network or connections. But I would like to ask maybe the other panel speakers or maybe Tammy, we can share a little bit about the insights about what do you think, and then or any opportunities. Yeah.
Sure.
Oh. How about Kelvin? I don't know.
Yeah,
As a producer
I think Kevin might
and
want to share. future plans that he might have for the development of the project?
Yeah.
I guess the future plan is that we have run out of funding for this project. So the next steps really, and I obviously will really need to get back with Lena and the team, but we are hoping to also obviously apply for more grants to continue the project, preferably in other states, in particular, that are usually, not Sydney and Melbourne. So we are looking at sort of potentially maybe Brisbane and ACT as well. So let's see. It's a bit too soon to say at the moment, but that's really the plan for this project itself. And obviously we would also be talking to funders as well to see if we can actually expand this into other places as well. Yeah.
Sure. I just wanted to comment that even having the project successfully launched in Sydney and also in Melbourne, it's been an amazing feat in itself, because of the difficulty of actually, even finding a place to actually show the work. And I know that I saw Wilson's great big long list of galleries he actually approached. And it's been a hard slog. It's been a lot of work, I know. But we do have a
Tammy,
few questions. Oh, yep.
Oh, yeah, Tammy, I was just going to say we have got a couple of questions.
Yes.
One of them is from a significant creator, Asian Australian creator of screen content, who's a champion of representation. And one of them is a question, if I'm not mistaken, from one of the artists asking about how white allies maybe can place themselves within this project.
Great.
So I thought it'd be great to talk about that. I guess just really briefly, my thinking there, I'm sure Kevin has a million ideas, is that this is opening a door for us to find ways to develop transnational and transcultural solidarity, surely. And also partnerships, interdisciplinary ones with amazing activists like Erin, who are doing the hard work in terms of collecting the data to enable us to tell truths in many ways.
Did anyone else want to?
Yeah, I'll quickly just jump in, and I think just kind of following on from what both Kevin and Imogen have also mentioned. I think in terms of, I guess, Joy's kind of question in terms of what can we do to move forward, and I think it's this show is like the start of bigger things to come. And for me, kind of being based, in the US and particularly in Southern California, and working with the Asian American community and the things that they've done, even pre-COVID, things like having Asian Australian Film Festival. I know that there's that Oz Asian Festival in Adelaide, but actually having a targeted Asian Australian Film Festival is one great example of moving forward, but also doing a lot more creative exhibitions, and that kind of way is spreading awareness and using this as a tool for advocacy, to pressure government, to pressure institutions to change. And where you cannot get rid of racism ever, because everybody, we all have to admit that we all have certain prejudices, whether it's big prejudice or less, but everyone has something. We're still in that process of decolonizing our own minds, but also, we're all still on that learning journey of understanding what racism is. And I think because you cannot get rid of it yet, but what you can do is we need to start advocating for change in decision-making roles. So looking at those who make decisions in every type of industry, creative, political, corporate, you got to change under demographics of those who are making the decisions. At the moment, we know in Australia, it's pretty much what we use the term white bread. And I think that really needs to change. And just very quickly I think the role of white allies from Benjamin O, who's actually one of my co-founders for Asian Australian Alliance, so I acknowledge Ben as well. And white allies are also important in this conversation. And I think it's looking at how a lot of white allies, particularly in the US, have worked well with Black Lives Matter movements, Indigenous movements, and Asian American movements, and the Latinx movements and things like that as well. And it's about, if you're going to be a white ally, don't overspeak, but learn to listen. And if we're talking about ourselves as Asians and how are we going to be allies to other communities, particularly First Nations and Indigenous, it's not about us talking to them, it's about us listening to what they have to say and what we should be doing in terms of, not us telling them what we should do to support them, but asking them, tell us what we need to do to support, to become, I guess, better allies. And like I said, America has had a better grasp in terms of what allyship means. And this is something that we need to start learning, things that we need to learn and unlearn as a community, but also for white allies to learn and unlearn.
Thank you, Erin. That was a great contribution to that question. And I really love this idea of unlearning. I've been learning a lot from that actually in recent times. In particular to do with Indigenous communities and actually trying to unlearn other ways that have always been and need to change. Mara, we're going to wrap up now, and Mara will finish off for us. And I'd like to thank all the panel speakers for such great contributions to the discussion. I've really enjoyed hearing your responses, and I am really excited to be back on campus and actually see the show up properly. Thank you again.
Thank you, Tammy, for facilitating this event tonight, and thank you everyone for your incredible thoughts, inputs, ideas, and of course all the artists as well for their incredible work in this event today. We hope that you will be able to come and visit the event in person at RMIT's Project Space Gallery in Cardigan Street, which will be on until the 3rd of December. If you want to visit that will be at Building 94, Level 2, Room 2, 23 to 27 Cardigan Street, Carlton, Victoria. The opening hours are on Monday by appointment only, but Tuesday until Friday from 12:30 to 5 p.m. We've posted some links on the slide behind me, and if you're interested in reviewing this session in the future, it will be made available on Diversity Arts and CAST websites over the next few days. Just a reminder, we are also planning a second public program, which will focus on the voice of the artists in this exhibition. The details will be publicised as soon as those are all confirmed. As today's topics have been of a sensitive racial nature, I would like to further advise that there is counselling services available on the I Am Not a Virus website under the Get Support tab, where you can find Asian Australian mental health practitioners. And also for RMIT students, you can access counselling through the university. Once again, thank you everyone so much, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.